I'm sorry, I can't marry you. Camille and I are announcing our engagement today instead. The microphone was still live when Preston said it, standing 3 feet away from me on the platform, the ceremonial shovel still in his hand, gold ribbon fluttering behind him like nothing had happened. The groundbreaking crowd went silent, then started whispering. My name was on the banner behind us. Cross and Hale Architecture presents the Meridian Spire. In front of 200 people, my fiancé had just uninvited me from my own life. I stood there in a hard hat and a blazer I'd picked out for this exact moment, feeling the ground actually seemed to tilt under me. Preston didn't even look ashamed. He looked relieved, like a man setting down a bag he'd been carrying too long. Bianca Calloway stepped up beside him, smiling the practiced smile of someone who'd been coached on exactly when to appear. Her father, Victor Calloway, senior partner of Calloway and Wren, watched from the front row with his arms crossed, satisfied, like he was closing a deal he'd already priced out months ago. I walked off that platform because staying up there one more second would have broken something in me permanently. Reporters were already typing. Somewhere behind me, I heard Bianca laugh at something Preston said, bright and easy, like humiliating another woman was just a pleasant footnote to her day. I made it to the folding chairs at the edge of the site before my legs gave out, and I sat down hard, staring at the dirt lot that was supposed to become our tower, the tower with my name buried somewhere in the fine print of a partnership agreement Preston would probably rewrite by Monday. That's when I noticed him, a man sitting 2 chairs down, also in a hard hat, also staring at nothing, his jaw tight in the particular way of someone holding themselves together through sheer will. He had the specific stillness of someone absorbing a hit that had landed a long time ago and never really stopped hurting. An older foreman glanced between the two of us and let out a short, humorless laugh. Well, would you look at that? 2 people the Calloways ruined in one lifetime, just at different addresses. He nodded at the man. This is Julian Reyes, used to be the best structural engineer this city had before Calloway needed someone to blame for a bridge. Then he looked at me. Might as well share a car back to the office, since neither of you has anywhere better to be today. Julian looked at me for a long moment, like he was deciding something important, the kind of decision that takes longer than it should because you've been burned before. Then he stood, held out a battered site tablet instead of a hand, and said, I've still got the old bridge files on here, if you ever want to know what actually happened to me before the papers decided what happened to me. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe because everyone else at that groundbreaking wanted a story out of me, and he was the only person in that whole crowd who wasn't asking me for one. We ended up at a diner 2 blocks from the site, the kind with vinyl booths and a laminated menu nobody actually reads. Neither of us ordered anything we actually wanted. The silence between us wasn't awkward exactly. It was more like 2 people standing at the edge of the same cliff, checking without speaking whether the other one was going to jump first, or whether it was safe to just sit down instead. Preston and I were together 6 years, I said finally, turning my water glass in slow circles on the table. He proposed at this site, actually, 2 years ago, standing on the same lot. Told me it would be our legacy project. Guess it still is. Just not mine anymore, apparently, not according to the banner they didn't even bother to take down. Julian didn't offer sympathy, which I appreciated more than I expected to. He just nodded like he understood the specific shape of that kind of loss, the kind that isn't about heartbreak so much as erasure. 2 years ago, I was the lead structural engineer on the Meridian Bridge, he said, his voice level and careful, like a man who'd told this story to himself so many times the pain had worn smooth. It collapsed during a routine stress test. Nobody died, which everyone kept telling me like it should have made the rest of it easier. It didn't. Calloway's firm signed off on my calculations, then told the review board afterward that I'd falsified the rebar specs to cut costs on the project. I lost my license, my reputation, and every single client I had within about 6 weeks. His voice never rose, not once. He just laid it out flat, like a man reading a coroner's report on his own career, a report he'd read too many times to still feel anything sharp about it. We were both wrecked by the same family, then, I said slowly, turning that thought over. Just at different points on the same timeline, apparently. Julian almost smiled, the first crack of something human in his careful composure. Guess that makes us the 2 saddest people in this particular diner tonight. I have a spare room, I said, before I'd fully decided to say it out loud. It's not glamorous, but it's paid for, and I genuinely cannot go back to the apartment Preston's name is still on the lease of, not tonight, maybe not for a while. He studied me for a long 10 seconds, weighing something I couldn't see. Okay, he said finally. Just until I figure out my next move. I nodded, and something in my chest loosened for the first time all day. That night, back at my place, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my phone, waiting for it to do the thing I both dreaded and expected. A message from Preston finally came through around midnight. Don't make this ugly. Camille's family can get us both further than you ever could have. We can still be friends about all of this, right? I read it twice, feeling something in my chest that used to be pain start to curdle into something colder and much clearer. I didn't reply. I opened his contact, blocked the number, deleted 6 years of messages in under a minute, photos and all, and set the phone face down on the nightstand like I was putting something dangerous to rest. For the first time since the platform, I could actually breathe all the way down into my lungs. I woke to the smell of coffee and something frying, and for one disoriented second, I thought I'd dreamed the entire previous day. Julian was in my kitchen in yesterday's clothes, flipping eggs with the same careful precision he probably once used to check load calculations on a bridge that mattered to thousands of drivers a day. He'd found the one working pan in my cabinet, the good one buried behind 3 I never used, and made something out of almost nothing in my nearly empty fridge. You didn't have to do that, I said, standing in the doorway in yesterday's clothes too. Figured we both needed one normal thing today, he said, sliding a plate toward me without any fanfare. It was the first meal in weeks that didn't taste like ash in my mouth. At the office, the whispers followed me through every hallway, quieting whenever I walked past a cluster of coworkers, then starting up again the second they thought I was out of earshot. My design partner, Renata, pulled me into the break room and closed the door behind us. Everyone's talking about the groundbreaking, she said carefully, watching my face for cracks. Are you okay, actually, not the version you're going to tell everyone else? I'm fine, I said, and meant it more than I expected to when the words left my mouth. Preston made his choice. I'm done being anyone's stepping stone toward a partnership. Renata blinked, clearly having braced for tears instead. You're taking this well. Suspiciously well. I'm not taking it well, I said. I'm taking it forward. There's a difference, and I only just figured that out myself last night. That evening, Julian was still at my kitchen table when I got home from work, but now surrounded by printouts, old stress diagrams, load tables covered in his own handwriting in the margins. You're an engineer, I said, watching him work with a focus that looked nothing like the quiet, defeated man from the diner. He looked up, glasses pushed into his hair. Structural, not architectural, he said, but buildings and bridges obey the exact same laws, whether anyone wants them to or not. Something's been bothering me since the groundbreaking today, actually. Calloway's announcing the Meridian Spire uses the same joint assembly system as the bridge that collapsed under me 2 years ago. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Are you sure? I asked. I need to see the specs before I can be sure, he said. But if I'm right, Calloway isn't just building a tower on the same lot where he humiliated you today. He's building the exact same failure, just taller and full of people this time instead of empty during a stress test. Over the following days, Julian and I fell into an odd, comfortable rhythm neither of us named out loud. He worked at the kitchen table late into the night, and I started leaving my desk lamp on in the next room just so the apartment didn't feel so quiet. I brought home takeout twice, and he cooked the other nights, always something simple, always exactly enough for 2. We didn't talk about Preston or Calloway much during those meals. We talked about smaller things, a documentary he'd half-watched, a building I loved downtown for reasons I could never fully explain to anyone else. It was strange how quickly the apartment stopped feeling like a place I was hiding in and started feeling like a place I actually lived. 2 days later, I saw Preston outside my building, leaning against his car like he owned the sidewalk and everything on it. Elena, he said, straightening up as I approached. This doesn't have to be complicated between us. He grabbed my wrist, the same easy possessiveness he'd always used, like touching me required no permission from me at all, like it never had. I pulled free before I even fully thought about doing it. Don't, I said. We're done, Preston. Blocked, remember, or did Camille's family not teach you how phones work? He laughed, short and ugly, the kind of laugh that used to make me shrink and now just made me tired. You'll regret burning this bridge, Elena. My firm's about to be the biggest name in the city within the year. That's when Julian stepped out of the building behind me, calm, unhurried, standing at my shoulder without crowding it, without making a show of it either. She's not your firm's employee anymore, and she's not yours either, he said, voice flat and completely final. I'd get back in the car if I were you. Preston's eyes flicked between us, calculating fast, then landed on something ugly and satisfied. Oh, he said slowly, drawing the word out. This is who you traded up for, the bridge guy. Careful, Elena, structural failures tend to run in his family of work, don't they? Something in me finally snapped clean, quiet, and total. He's the only person who's told me the truth since this whole thing started, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Get in your car, Preston. Preston left, but not before giving Julian a look that promised this wasn't over between them, not by a long shot. Inside, my hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From something closer to relief and maybe a little bit of pride. That night, I finally did what I'd been avoiding since the diner. I searched Julian's name properly, past the surface headlines everyone already knew. Structural engineer scapegoated in Meridian Bridge collapse, one article read, tucked into an archive nobody bothered to keep updated. Calloway firm accused of cost cutting on critical rebar order, read another, buried and barely followed up on before the story quietly died. I read for over an hour, piecing together what the official story had conveniently left out. Julian hadn't just been blamed after the fact. He'd tried to raise the alarm 3 separate times before the bridge failed, in writing, with his own calculations attached. And each time his warnings had been suppressed by Calloway himself to keep the project on budget and on schedule for a ribbon cutting that mattered more to Calloway than the people who would eventually drive across it. When Julian came out of the spare room around midnight, I didn't hide what I'd found on my laptop screen. I know what actually happened to you, I said quietly, turning it toward him. You tried to stop it. 3 times in writing, and he buried every single one. He went very still, staring at the screen like it might disappear if he looked away. And he said finally, his voice thinner than I'd heard it before. And I want to know how we stop him from doing it again, I said. With people this time, not just a bridge over an empty stress test. Something shifted behind his eyes, something that looked like the first real hope he'd allowed himself in 2 full years. You don't know what you're offering to get involved in, he said. Calloway has lawyers, city contracts, half the planning board in his pocket, and probably a few reporters too. I'm an architect who just got publicly dumped in front of 200 people and a news crew, I said. I don't have much left to lose that he hasn't already taken from me in some form. He studied me a long moment, then reached into his bag and pulled out an old, scratched hard drive he'd clearly been carrying around for 2 years like a talisman. I kept my original calculations, he said. The real ones, before Calloway's people altered the file that went to the review board afterward. If the Meridian Spire uses the same joint system, this proves the flaw was never mine to begin with. It was baked into every project his firm has cut corners on since the bridge, and probably before it too. Then we need more than proof sitting on a hard drive, I said, an idea forming slowly, piece by piece, the way a floor plan comes together. We need Calloway to build it anyway, and we need someone with real authority watching closely when it fails, publicly, undeniably. Julian's mouth curved, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since we met. I know exactly who that should be, he said. I've been waiting 2 years for someone crazy enough to help me get it in front of him. Arthur Voss ran the city's independent structural review board, the one body Calloway's influence had never fully reached, because Voss refused every dinner invitation and every campaign donation on principle, and had made more than a few enemies doing it. He'll never take a meeting with either of us directly, Julian said, spreading files across the table. Calloway's people watch his calendar closer than they watch their own quarterly earnings. But he still attends the Founders Gala every single year, the one event he can't politically afford to skip without raising questions. If someone got close enough to hand him the original data in person, quietly, without a scene, it could get referred for independent review before the Spire's opening ceremony instead of after, when it would actually matter. That someone should be me, I said, surprising myself with how sure I sounded. I still have my invitation, technically. I'm still listed as project architect of record until Calloway's lawyers finish rewriting the contracts to erase me from it. Julian looked uneasy, his jaw tightening. That gala will be full of people who watched you get humiliated 2 weeks ago, on camera, with a hashtag attached by now probably. I know, I said. That's exactly why no one in that room will expect me to walk back in with my head up instead of hiding. We spent the next 4 days preparing like it was a job interview for a life I hadn't picked yet. Julian coached me on what Voss would actually care about: load ratios and safety margins, not gossip or sympathy, and how to get 30 seconds of his attention without triggering his very well-trained instinct for being lobbied by people with an agenda. I rented a dress that made me feel like the person I used to be before Preston slowly made me smaller over 6 quiet years without me fully noticing it happening. Julian rehearsed the approach with me in the kitchen every night, voice low and steady, in a way that reminded me of someone walking a stranger through a demolition countdown. Calm because panic never helped anyone survive the blast. "You'll be fine," he said the night before, setting down his coffee. "You've already survived worse rooms than this one, and you did it without any of this preparation." The gala was exactly the kind of glittering, self-congratulatory event architecture firms throw when they want to be seen far more than they want to actually be heard. Chandeliers, a string quartet nobody was listening to, champagne towers that cost more than some people's rent. I found Arthur Voss near the terrace within 20 minutes, a stern man in his 60s nursing a single scotch and clearly counting down the minutes until he could politely leave without offending his hosts. "Mr. Voss," I said, steadying my voice the way Julian had drilled into me, "I have information about the Meridian Spire's joint assembly system you'll want before the opening ceremony, not after something goes wrong in front of a crowd." His eyes sharpened instantly, all traces of polite boredom gone in half a second. He took the drive I offered without comment, sliding it smoothly into his jacket pocket like he'd done this exact motion before. "Who sent you?" he asked quietly. "Someone who tried to stop this 2 years ago and was silenced for it," I said. He studied me for a long beat, then nodded once, sharp and final, the nod of a man who just decided to trust a stranger over an institution. "I'll have my people look at this tonight, personally." That's when Preston found me, Bianca on his arm, both of them radiating the particular smugness of people who genuinely believe the story is already over and they've already won it. "Elena," he said loudly, deliberately drawing eyes from nearby guests. "Didn't expect the help to get an invite tonight, of all things." Bianca laughed, high and performative, clearly enjoying the audience. "I heard you're rooming with the bridge guy now. Very on brand, honestly, considering how well things collapsed for you 2 weeks ago." A few nearby guests actually turned to watch, sensing blood in the water the way this particular crowd always could. I felt the old instinct to shrink down to nothing, and then, deliberately, I let it go completely, all at once. "I designed the tower whose groundbreaking you hijacked, Preston," I said, calm and clear, my voice carrying further than I intended. "And you're standing here celebrating a building that's about to fail the exact same review your father-in-law's bridge failed 2 years ago, for the exact same reason. You should probably sit closer to the exits at the opening ceremony, just in case." Preston's smile faltered for the first time all night, real uncertainty creeping into his expression. "What are you talking about, Elena?" "You'll see," I said, and walked away before he could recover his footing, my heartbeat steadier than it had been in weeks, maybe longer. The city ordered an emergency inspection of the Meridian Spire's structural plans 4 days later, based on independently verified data submitted anonymously to the review board through proper channels. Calloway's firm called it a baseless smear campaign in the press, loudly and repeatedly, right up until the inspection confirmed the joint assembly system was structurally identical to the one that failed on the Meridian Bridge. This time rated to hold triple the load in a much taller structure that would eventually house hundreds of offices full of people. The story broke everywhere at once, every local outlet and a few national ones picking it up within a day. Calloway and Reyes, standing in city contracts, collapsed within the week, 3 major clients pulling out publicly within 72 hours. Preston's engagement announcement was quietly buried under headlines about criminal negligence charges being considered against the firm's senior partner. And quietly, within days, so was Preston's name on the project. Julian got the call from Arthur Voss himself on a Tuesday afternoon. The original bridge data had been enough to reopen his case entirely, start to finish. His license was reinstated, his name formally cleared in a public statement the city was legally required to issue and did, printed in 3 newspapers. He sat at my kitchen table reading the letter 3 times before he said anything at all, his hands not quite steady around the paper. 2 years, he finally said, voice rough in a way I hadn't heard from him before. 2 years of people thinking I killed a bridge, and it's over in one printed paragraph on page 4. I sat down across from him, close enough that our knees almost touched. Does it feel like enough? I asked gently. He thought about it honestly, which I'd come to expect and appreciate from him by then, more than almost anything else about him. It doesn't feel like triumph, he admitted quietly. It feels like I can finally stop holding my breath after 2 years of not even noticing I'd been doing it constantly. That's not nothing, I said. Sometimes clean is better than triumphant, and I think we earned clean. 3 weeks later, Arthur Voss's office reached out again, this time with a formal offer. The city was launching an independent structural review division in the wake of everything that had come out, and they wanted Julian to lead it, full authority, permanent staff, real oversight power this time, the kind that might have saved the bridge if it had existed 2 years earlier. He came home holding the offer letter like it might disappear if he set it down too fast. There's one condition I'm adding myself, before I even sign anything, he said, looking up at me across the kitchen where all of this had actually started. I want an architect I trust running design review alongside me, someone who already proved she won't look away from an inconvenient truth even when it costs her something. He looked at me directly. I don't want to do this without you, Elena. I looked at the letter, then at him, then around the kitchen we'd somehow turned into the center of both our lives without ever quite deciding to. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Let's build something that doesn't fall down for once. 1 year later, our new office sat on the top floor of a building we'd helped clear for occupancy ourselves. Blueprints for 3 approved public projects spread across the same kind of table we used to crowd with bridge files and cold takeout containers late into the night. Julian found me on the small balcony off the office one evening, watching the skyline where the real, corrected Meridian spire was finally rising, safely this time, on the plans I'd redesigned around his fully repaired calculations. What are you thinking about? He asked, handing me a coffee instead of wine, since we still had a site visit later that evening. The groundbreaking, I said, wrapping both hands around the warm cup. How I thought that was the worst day of my entire life, standing there in that stupid hard hat. Is it still? He asked quietly, watching my face instead of the skyline. No, I said, turning to look at him properly, fully. I think it was the day everything that actually mattered started, even though it took me weeks to understand that. Julian reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box, plain, no velvet theatrics, just brushed steel, to match the work we did every single day now. Our first partnership was built out of a diner booth and 2 ruined careers neither of us chose, he said, turning the box slowly in his hands. I want the next one built because I chose it, deliberately, not because Calloway left us no other option that day. Alina Cross, will you marry me? Yes, I said, and meant it the way I'd never quite meant anything before in my life. Standing on a balcony over a city that no longer had any power left to humiliate either of us, in a life we'd built with our own 2 hands, one honest calculation at a time.